Welcome to week 23 of the Tech and Productivity News Update. We finally got some interesting news this week, so let's get started. On the first, MiniMax released MiniMax M3, which is their new open weight frontier model. It's got a 1 million token context, and it's natively multimodal, so it supports text, image, video, and also desktop control. I believe the previous version, M2.7, was not natively multimodal, it only supported text, so this is a very nice improvement. It introduces their new sparse attention architecture that scales context up to 1 million tokens with much lower compute. This new model also introduces their token plan pricing, and they have 3 tiers. We have a $20, $50, and $120 Ultra plan. So the way this works is they give you a pool of tokens. So for the Plus plan, you get 1.7 billion tokens, and it doesn't quite spell it out on their pricing page, but that's probably assuming that's the combination of input and output tokens. So for $20 a month, you get almost 2 billion tokens combined, input and output. But of course, there's also the traditional API pricing if you don't want to use a subscription. There's something kind of funny about this, and I'm not even quite sure. It's not really explained too well, but let me go through this with you and maybe you'll understand it better than I did. So basically it costs differently depending on the number of input tokens. If you're sending less than 512,000 input tokens, the cost is going to be 60 cents. If you're sending over 512,000 tokens as input, it's going to cost you $1.20 for the input. However, the way they describe it is input per million tokens, even though that doesn't quite make sense because there are limits to these, so I'm not quite sure how that works out. But essentially they do have 2 pricing tiers, and it has to do with the amount of input that you're sending. So even at the expensive end, if you're using that full 1 million token input, it's still just going to be $4.80 per million output token. So regardless of how the pricing actually works out, it's still ridiculously cheap compared to other frontier models, especially ones that have open weights like MiniMax M3. Here's one of the graphics they released for this model. Here we can see the usual suspects in terms of coding benchmarks, Vive-v2, I'm not sure what that one is, SVG bench, so creating SVGs, kernel bench hard is a new one for me, some to do with MCPs, using the operating system, using tools, GDP, VBal, rubrics, I'm not sure what this one is, and browse comp, so using the browser. As we can see, M3 is actually scoring pretty competitively, at least in these benchmarks, compared to some of the closed source models like Anthropic's Opus 4.7. It's funny, obviously they didn't choose to compare it to 4.8, even though it was just released. They're also comparing it to GPT 5.5 and Gemini 3.1 Pro, but it's still pretty good. And so it looks like M3 is going to be a highly competitive model. As part of the release, they also asked it to do some very interesting tasks like independently reproducing a scientific paper. And they say that it ran nearly for 12 hours, producing 18 commits and 23 experimental figures. Basically, they're just trying to throw harder and harder problems at these models, especially the ones that have very long time horizons, are very complex, have a lot of steps where the model has to iterate over its work, fix its own mistakes, and at the end, either stop or be stopped by the researchers. So it's pretty interesting to see all these new models that are coming out are focusing on the same types of things. And here they also tried to get MiniMax M3 to actually complete some of the training process for a large language model on its own. And it seems that they are getting some success, so that's pretty surprising. I think we're going to be seeing these kinds of more real-world complex tasks used as benchmarks, or at least as complements to the benchmarks, because these numbers really just aren't telling us all that much. Next up, GitHub Copilot's AI credits billing system goes live. I mentioned this in a previous update where they were going to move away from the system where you just had a certain number of uses of AI and then you could run the model for as much as you want, whether it was a simple task or a complex task, they all just cost the same and you used up your tokens. Obviously that was very expensive for GitHub, and so they switched to the token-based billing, and that went live on the 1st of June. So that's for all paid plans. They now include monthly AI credits, and that's what you get to use. Code completion is, however, still unlimited, and the Copilot plans start at $10, and I believe they only have the $10 plan, which is the Pro one, and Pro Plus, which is $39. So a sad day for anyone using GitHub Copilot. I'm sure they're going to be looking for alternatives after this. On the first, Zoom also launched their AI productivity suite, so that includes things like Zoom Canvas, previously that was called Zoom Docs, Zoom Slides, Zoom Sheets, Zoom Paper, obviously all powered by Zoom AI. I don't believe that's actually a model that they have, it's just probably a wrapper around one of the major frontier models that are available. These new tools are meant to help users generate documents, presentations, and spreadsheets directly from meetings, calls, and chat context. As with other companies that we've seen in previous updates, like Slack and granola. They're really trying to use meetings, calls, and chat as the source of truth, and from there stem all the different agentic abilities. So taking meetings and then turning them into tasks, maybe turning it into presentations, or that spins off some spreadsheets that need to be made. So whichever app actually controls where the context is held, like Zoom is now trying to do, is going to be really well positioned to add all these other branching abilities that are adjacent and necessary for companies and entrepreneurs and just basic businesses. So the pricing for this is included with a ZoomMate subscription, which is $20 a month, or is also available as a standalone or add-on for $10 per user per month with AI credits included. This week we also got DuckDuckGo to add no AI browser extensions for Firefox and Chrome. So that just allows users to search the internet without AI generated answers, no chatbots, and fewer AI images. DuckDuckGo is really going in hard on trying to help out those users that are not interested at all in having AI in their search results, and especially with what happened last week at Google's I/O conference where they announced the big changes coming to Chrome. AI is pretty much going to be involved in every single one of the searches now. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for DuckDuckGo to expand with their no AI options. On the second, Microsoft launched a whole bunch of new models. According to them, they're all trained from scratch, not based on any other existing model or using any open source models. So we've got My Thinking 1, which is really being compared as a competitor to Sonnet 4.6, according to Microsoft. It's trained on enterprise-grade, clean, and commercially licensed data. So that's something they're really trying to focus on. This is not just a bunch of stuff they pull from the web. It's been appropriately licensed, and it's clean, and it's, really okay to use, especially if you're a company and you're looking for an AI to bring in to handle your systems. This is what they're trying to position as a model for. Fortunately, it only has a 256K token window, which in 2026 is kind of small compared to some of the other models. We just saw MiniMax M3. It has up to 1 million token context window, but this is Microsoft's first real foray into releasing their own frontier level model, so I'm sure it's going to improve over time. They also released a coding specific agent, My Code 1 Flash, and they compared it to Haiku 4.5. Kind of an odd comparison because 4.5 hasn't been updated in a very, very long time. We're up to 4.8 now with the Opus series, and so you can see that Haiku's just kind of been languishing. So I don't know why they chose to make that comparison. I guess just to not get anyone's hopes up. This is a very small, capable, inexpensive model for basic coding tasks. And then they also released My Image 2.5 and a Flash version. According to them, it ranks number 2 in Arena.ai, ahead of Nano Banana 2. So we now have an additional option when it comes to AI images. They also released My Transcribe 1.5. It's a transcription model. It supports 43 different languages, My Voice 2, and a Flash variant. And these are text-to-speech models. They support 15 different languages. They also highlighted a Mayo Clinic collaboration that's in the works, where they're going to try to create a frontier healthcare model that's focused on advanced clinical reasoning, which is first going to be used internally by the Mayo Clinic and then should be available externally. And lastly, they also mentioned their Microsoft Frontier Tuning, which is a reinforcement learning approach where organizations can fine-tune any one of these models on their own workflows. And the idea is that through that fine-tuning, you're able to get much better performance at a much lower cost. The example they provided in the press release was a model that they had fine-tuned using their Microsoft Frontier Tuning to achieve GPT 5.4 level performance at 10 times lower cost. So with this massive release of models, it really does seem like Microsoft is trying to distance itself from OpenAI and the models that it's been using for all their products. They're really trying to create their own frontier models that are comparable, competitive, and you can just swap out for OpenAI and use in your Microsoft-centric workflows. Here are some benchmarks Microsoft provided comparing their My Thinking 1 model to Sonnet 4.6, Opus 4.6, GPT 5.4, and a couple of the other open source or Chinese models. When we take a look at the performance, it's actually pretty comparable to some of these other models. I honestly wouldn't put too much stock in the performance of these benchmarks because if you look at all the other models, they're at least in the high 80s. So it's not really telling us all that much. These are around different mathematics exams, STEM exams, things that can be really well trained into these models. Where it's far more interesting is the performance around agentic coding. We've got Terminal Bench 2, SW Bench Verified, and SW Bench Pro. The performance here is not as good when we look at the models from Anthropic, OpenAI, and even some of the Chinese labs. So this is definitely where I feel Microsoft is going to have to catch up with the other models around agentic coding, using the browser, using the computer. This is where I feel other models are going to outpace them for quite a while, at least until they eventually catch up. And lastly, on the 4th, Apple approves Poke for messages. Sounds like we're talking about Facebook, it's not that. This is the first AI agent approved for Apple Messages for Business platform. Didn't even know that was a thing. Users can chat with it in iMessage and have it take actions based on the request. So it's the first agent that you can actually access officially through Apple's iMessage. So if you've used any other agents, either in WhatsApp or Telegram, you are already familiar with all the things that it's going to be able to do. What's special about it is it's the first one that's available through iMessages. Previously, other agentic AI companies had attempted something like this, getting around their verification system so they could connect the agents to the user through iMessages, and Apple had basically removed their apps from the App Store, and so that's why I included it. It's kind of a big deal. It's the first app to actually get blessing from Cupertino and be allowed to use Apple's infrastructure. So we'll see what actually happens if Poke becomes something, or if it ends up being one of the countless AI companies that spring up, drum up a lot of press, and then quietly disappear. And that is it for this week's tech and productivity update. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's update. So until then, I'll see you in the next one.